Hello, how are you doing? It's been a busy few weeks for me, but I have something which resembles a routine right about now, so I have been getting back into the whole work thing. In fact, I'll have some new content for you this Friday on the main channel. Actually, something pretty substantial. It's a good 28 minutes long. We are kicking off the new Retrohoy season, which is dedicated to classic PC first-person shooters, and we're kicking it off with the granddaddy, which is Wolfenstein 3D. Anyway, I considered some Wolfenstein footage for the background of this bonus, but instead I thought I'd tackle my backlog, and I picked up the Order 1886 instead on PS4. Which, it has to be said, is a very nice looking game. You'll have to excuse the black bars on the top and the bottom of the screen. It runs at a slightly wider aspect ratio, which they say is to give it a more cinematic feel, but really it just reduces the frame size and lets them hit their render targets more easily. But, you know, I don't mind cinematic realism. I actually think it's quite nice sometimes to have lens flares and, you know, all that. It is a very, very pretty game, as you'll see. It's light on gameplay, but it does have some very nice guns, so I'm conflicted. I'm not like a huge fan of steampunk. I think it's sort of been done to death in cosplay and stuff like that. But this is actually pretty cool. I like it because it's like sort of transformation of like really obscure classic weapons, like a Borchardt pistol. I think there's a Webley Fosbury automatic revolver in there as well. And the main weapon is, it looks like a bar, but it's got all these filigree engravings on it. So it's this sort of weird alternate sort of steampunky history set in London, and it's very, very cool. Unfortunately, the game's about 4 hours long, and it's festooned with cutscenes, but I feel almost inclined to forgive it, based on the fact that it's got a really cool setting, it looks fantastic, and I didn't pay very much for it. I think I got this for about £12.50 or something. Short games not such a problem for me at the minute, given my lack of time. I'm trying to find a balance between doing work and playing video games, because I do have quite a backlog. I mean, I've still got the Black Ops 3 campaign to play. I've got the enhanced edition of Divinity Original Sin to play through. I bought Wonderful 101, Bayonetta 2. I've got Fallout 4 coming at some point today. Apparently it's out for delivery. It's like 7 PM or something. Still not here, but that's Amazon logistics for you. And I even bought Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is coming out here on Friday. So I've got all these games to play, and I've got absolutely zero time to play them. Well, I've got not zero time, but like 0.1 time. But things are getting better. I'm past the worst. And I've got to say, I feel a lot better for having a new video for this Friday. Anyway, questions. Let's answer them. Nate LB says, I've still been waiting on your opinion on the gun culture in America. What do you think of law-abiding citizens owning and carrying guns in self-defense? What about those who shouldn't get guns and go and use them in gun-free zones? Wouldn't it make sense to arm areas that are always targets for nut jobs? Obviously, there is a lot of debate about that over here, but I've always wanted to know your opinion on the matter since you do research on guns and have a pretty good head on you. That, and you actually have a few guns, if I remember correctly, albeit probably deactivated because of your country's laws. I'm a licensed concealed carry permit holder and carry a gun daily for the rare instance I might need it, but some would call me crazy or paranoid. I see it as this. Better to have a gun and never need it, than to desperately need a gun and not have one. Oh, it's a heavy, juicy question for the first one. Generally, I am pro-gun. I like sport shooting, I like target shooting. I would probably be a member of a rifle club if there was one closer to me, and if it wasn't so expensive to shoot. Politics-wise, I'm generally laissez-faire, and I'm not a big believer in restricting people's rights unless there's a very good reason to. So, gun ownership, responsible gun ownership, seems like a pretty reasonable thing to permit. We allow people to own knives, chainsaws, all sorts of nasty things that could potentially be used in violent crime, or to decapitate your enemies in a cartel-style killing. But guns kind of have this character of their own, don't they? There's a fear of guns. Nobody's afraid of chainsaws. They're afraid of chainsaw-wielding maniacs, but they're not afraid of chainsaws themselves. However, having said all that, I wouldn't want to live in the Wild West. And so the idea that people should be armed when they go to the shops or whatever, that strikes me as a little jarring. I'm not sure I'd want to live in America that was like that. Now, obviously, America is a different place to the UK, and I'm coming from a culture which doesn't carry guns habitually, where guns are in fact a rarity. Which, I've got to admit, feels like a bit of a luxury sometimes. It's nice knowing that if you are going to be involved in a violent crime, you're far more likely to be stabbed than shot. That's reassuring in a sort of way. So I don't know how I feel about people who are eager to concealed carry. I think if you're going to live in a nation where gun ownership is legal, I think something like concealed carry is a good thing, but I don't think it should be a necessary thing. I think the crux of the gun issue in America has nothing to do with the guns. It really comes down to crime, and it comes down to mental health. And America kind of finds itself at odds. You know, America's this wonderful land of opportunity where anyone can become rich and anybody can build a business and flourish and, you know, become amongst the best of the best. However, it doesn't always work out, and quite often you do have a situation where you've got massive income disparity. And because of this very sort of individualist philosophy that's so pervasive in America, nobody wants to give money to the poor, to the infirm, to those suffering from mental illness. Nobody wants to give anything from their own personal lot. Because, well, why should they? If the poor don't want to be poor, why don't they just work harder? And I'm all for rewarding individual excellence and encouraging that sort of entrepreneur spirit. I'm all for that. I wouldn't describe myself as an anti-capitalist by any means. But I think if you ever reach the point where you have severe crime issues, where you have people suffering from mental illness who are basically left to survive on their own, you are going to run into problems. So it might be wise to open your heart a little bit to some policies which might be written off as socialistic. I know it's a dirty word over there. I know it is. But, you know, it works out, doesn't it? If you look after the worst off members of your society and they're a little bit happier, then they don't have to turn to crime. Anyway, it's difficult to reconcile, really. But the problem isn't the guns, and it never was. It's the crime. Anyway, I shall leave it at that because this is, well, it is quite a divisive issue. Branchy Spore 700 says, Stu, do you plan to play Soma? It's a new sci-fi horror game from the guys who made Amnesia, and it's absolutely brilliant. Not especially terrifying, but very disturbing. It manages to deal with philosophical issues such as consciousness really well, without sounding pretentious. I haven't played it yet, but I have heard of it, and I would quite like to play it at some point. I'm not a big fan of like these horror games, but science fiction horror is, well, it's more interesting. There's another sci-fi horror game that's, well, supposedly forthcoming called Routine, which looks absolutely brilliant. It's got this sort of wonderful, sort of retro-futuristic sort of aesthetic about it. It takes place on an abandoned moon base. And, well, that's about all I know. But what we've seen so far is pretty cool. But yes, one day I shall play Soma. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. All these games to play, and I'm sitting on the cusp of Fallout 4, which is probably going to take me at least, probably 100 hours or so. Eric Salas says, is it a boy or a girl, Stu? It's a boy. Ali Convoy says, which software do you use for creating graphics? I tend to start with Adobe Illustrator. That's for my vector illustrations, that sort of thing. And then I take things into Photoshop, where I compose them, rasterize them, and save them out as layers. And the composition and the rudimentary animation that I do is done within Sony Vegas. Perhaps not the cleanest workflow in the world, but, you know, it works for me. Trickster102 says, instead of Rock Band, have you considered getting Rocksmith instead? Uses a real guitar and teaches you how to use it, if you don't know already. I would like to try Rocksmith at some point, but I suppose the major hurdle to that is, well, the fact that you've got to buy a real guitar. And I know that's not necessarily such a big investment. There are plenty of, cheaper sort of budget ones for learning on. But I'm not so sure if I want to invest the energy into learning how to play guitar. I know a few chords, I can strum out, a bit of a tune, but I don't know, I'm not sure if I want to learn more than that. Not when I can be doing something else instead. Speaking of which, Revolutions 8D says, hey Stu, how's progress on your game, Crush, coming? I would really like to play it at some point in time. Well, I'll be honest, I haven't really had any time for it lately, just because of the pressures on my routine. But it is on my mind, and I would like to get back to it. So in fact, I'm thinking about releasing an early version of it. Essentially, I have no confidence in the economic viability of my game. I wouldn't mind getting it on Steam and selling it that way at some point in the future. But I'm thinking what I might do is I might release an early version, like an alpha, for free, and I might do like staged releases. So what I'd like to do is kind of put all the basic features in, because there's no sound currently. So I want to put some basic sound in, put a basic layer of polish in, and then wrap it up as like an alpha. And then, yeah, make it freeware. Because there is no greater shame in making a game that only you can play. So it would be nice to get some other people playing it. So that is my ambition. At some point, I will probably pick up development again. And yeah, like I say, I want to get the basics in first. And once I've done that, I'll package up an alpha, maybe make a website, just a, rudimentary thing, and then put it up for download somewhere. That is the plan, but videos will probably take priority for the time being. I think at some point fairly soon I might invest in a Crush Dev diary, because I should get back in the saddle, really. Andy Barr says, "Hey Stu, great seeing back. Just wanted to ask a quick question. Do you ever get frustrated when it's clear you always put so much time and effort into all your videos, but your channel isn't as well known, and you don't get as much views as other similar YouTubers?" I don't know. I mean, obviously it's nice when videos get a lot of views. It is nice, because it means not only will there be a bigger paycheck when it comes to the payment for that month, but it also means you're getting a lot of attention and a flurry of comments. And, I'm a bit of an introvert, I'll be honest, but attention is still quite nice. But views are not my primary goal, they are ancillary. If views were my primary goal, I would do clickbait, because, I hate to say it, clickbait works. Look, I wish it didn't, but it just does. My 2 most viewed videos, in fact the only videos that I have that have surpassed 1 million views, 101 Things to Do in Grand Theft Auto 5. It's a numbered list. And Worst Xbox 360 Games Ever, which was a top 10. With an all-caps title. I'm very sorry about that. It was an experiment. I was doing it for science. Anyway, as it turns out, the experiment was successful because they get views and they continue to get views. In fact, the Worst Xbox 360 Games Ever video is amongst my top viewed videos even today. It's 2 years old and it still gets massive views. If views were my only goal, I would do clickbait, and I could probably make a killing off it. But you know what? There's something else. It's a creative thing for me. I like to create videos. Really the only satisfaction I'm looking for is the satisfaction of me, the artist, the self. I want to have a piece of work that I can look at and say, hey, I'm pretty proud of that. It's true, views are a factor for me, which is why I try new formats and I try and find this balance between this creative satisfaction and the amount of views that they get. And the formats that I flock to tend to be the ones that satisfy on both those fronts simultaneously. So, Iconic Arms performs pretty well because it resembles a weapon guide and I've got the audience for that. And I also quite like it because it's a really nicely framed vignette of a weapon, something I'm interested in. My only reservations about Iconic Arms is the politics behind guns and the idea that I could be written off as like a weird gun channel when I want to be broader. I want to do video games in general. But otherwise, good series. Also, some of the specials that I've done, the Easter egg video, that performs really well to this day, gets quite a few views, and it was a pretty nice composition. Also, the Open World Origins video, that went down well. So for that reason, I'll be revisiting the Origins format fairly soon, in fact after this Retro Ahoy run. Retro Ahoy, I think actually has potential. I think it's very, very basic. It's me writing about an old video game, and that's all it is, that's all it's ever going to be. Very, very simple. But because of its simplicity, people largely know what to expect. The Half-Life video I did very, very well, and I'm hoping that the other FPS videos that I'm doing in that series, I'm hoping they're going to do similarly well, but we'll see. I don't mind if they don't, it was worth it just to find out how well it did. I'm Tay, who says, I would be honoured to see a video of how you produce your content, preferably the graphic designs, since that is my area of expertise. Do you know, I've considered getting a handycam, like a camcorder sort of thing, and doing like a Gonzo-style documentary behind the scenes. I don't know how well it would work, and I don't know where I'd upload it. I suppose here would be fine. I think if I ever did like paid-for, subscriber-only videos, like the behind-the-scenes stuff would be prime candidates for that. Because, let's be honest, I'll give you my best work for free, and I always plan on doing that, but shaky camcorder footage of a dishevelled man sat at a computer, I don't mind charging money for that. Anyway, I should be careful. Some people really balk at the idea of paid content. The very idea of having to pay for something that they want to see sickens them to their very core. But with all this talk of YouTube Red paid stuff and Patreon, stuff like that, if I hadn't considered, the potential of ad revenue completely evaporating and having to go to a subscription model, well, I wouldn't be doing my job, quite frankly. But I may, at some point, experiment with behind-the-scenes content. I'll tell you when I might do it. I'm going to be devising a new format. This Legendary Monsters, Iconic Monsters, whatever it ends up being called. I think I might actually document the process of developing that. So you can see, from the ground up, from nothing more than an idea, from a crystalline concept to the finished product. I think it'd be quite interesting to sort of show how it comes and what my process is. And for those of you worried about me giving away my secrets, don't worry. The secret is hard work. Paul Ulo says, what are your thoughts on card games, Stu? Do you enjoy them? And if so, which ones do you play? Card games. Gwent, specifically. I did get into Gwent quite badly when I was playing The Witcher 3. I did enjoy that. It's completely imbalanced, but the collection aspect I really liked. I think if they released like a Gwent arcade game, or even a full-price title, I would be tempted. Anyway, I am quite fond of the closest analogue in real life, which would be Magic the Gathering. I do quite like that, and I've got a couple of booster boxes tucked away in the loft. But I don't really play with the cards so much. I don't really have... My wife isn't interested in this. She gets angry at games with complex rules. She doesn't do well with stuff like that. Ever since I tried playing a game of Flux with her, and she doesn't trust card games ever since Flux. Flux is a game where you can use cards to change the rules of the game of Flux. So the rules change as you play, and you can play cards to change the rules, and it's very, very complex. But it's also quite good fun. Quite a creative game. But no, she didn't like that. So we don't play card games anymore. But yeah, with Magic the Gathering, I'll be honest, it's the collection aspects and the unboxing, unwrapping, and ooh, a shiny rare, that sort of thing. I like that. I don't mind playing the games. The arcade games, what is it, Duels of the Planeswalkers, I quite like those games. I think the 2014 one wasn't so good, but the ones before that. Kevin L. Derp says, you should do a Retrohoy on Serious Sam. Those games were so fun and wildly different than a lot of other FPS I've played. Do you know, I would quite like to. I'm quite fond of Serious Sam. The trouble is, there are so many first-person shooters from that era. I couldn't possibly hope to cover them all. I mean, I'm doing 6. We start off with Wolfenstein 3D. In fact, we do the id trilogy, basically. We do Wolfenstein, we do Doom, we do Quake. And then beyond that, we've already done Half-Life. Another one from around that era, Unreal. Unreal's quite important from a technological perspective. And, it's a good game in its own right. And the final choice, number 6, Duke Nukem 3D. Which is a little bit different, but Duke is a very compelling character. Something which a lot of early FPS kind of lacked. And Duke 3D is more innovative than it's normally given credit for. Its weapons are pretty creative and fun. The way that it does the characterization of Duke and the fact that it's got a voiced character is not really like anything else that came before it. And it's a well-remembered game. I like Duke. Oh, and then of course you've got the story with Duke Nukem Forever, the endless saga. But yeah, those are the 6 I've chosen, but there's so many others that you could have done. There's a few console FPS that I wouldn't mind doing. I mean, there's Halo, obviously. Time Splitters, I think, probably deserves an episode. A lot of people have fond memories for Time Splitters. And then there's stuff like GoldenEye 007, which, of course, is it paved the way for FPS on the console, or at least the acceptance of FPS on the console. Then you've got the sort of the secondary Heretic, Hexen, Blood, Painkiller, Serious Sam. You've got the rise of cinematic realism in FPS, which is pretty important considering games like this today with Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor gave us stuff like Call of Duty, which has been reasonably influential, I think it's fair to say. But the trouble is, I mean, that's probably a good 12 to 20 potential episodes. And to go into all of those, in as much detail as they deserve would, well, it'd be quite a lot of work. I may do them in the future. I'm not ruling it out. Although, I do have some reservations about making Retrohoy too FPS focused. Now, this season is all classic FPS, but I do want to make it clear that that's not what future seasons of Retrohoy are going to be like. I think what I might do is I might pick a theme. So like soldier, spy, adventure, that sort of thing, and then explore maybe, I don't know, I might do some short seasons of 3 episodes, I might do some fuller seasons of 6 episodes, and then explore a theme. One thing I'd like to do is an Alien season, so I'd maybe pick 3 Alien games for Retrohoy, and then maybe I'd do an Iconic Arms on the ray gun, and then maybe I could do an Iconic Monsters on Aliens. So yeah, kind of a composite series, and then maybe a special as well. I'd like to do sort of cinematic influence. I'd like to look at the effects that the Alien films have had on video games. So 6 episodes in a season run, that's 3 Retro Hoys and an Iconic Arms, an Iconic Monsters, and a special. That's, a neat ensemble with aliens as the theme. That is a potential. Definitely. And that would give me more than enough excuse to cover UFO Enemy Unknown, or XCOM, which is one of my favourite games and one that I would desperately like to cover. Anyway, that's 20 minutes, so I shall leave you about here. But thank you very much for watching. I shall see you on Friday on the main channel for a Wolfenstein 3D Spectacular. And I'm about to start work on the Doom episode, which should be good fun, because I always do enjoy playing Doom when I have to record it for a video. Anyway, I shall try and get into a better routine with bonus, so you'll see them more frequently going forward. So, hopefully in a week or two, another bonus for you. It'll probably be Fallout 4, because I imagine that's what I'll be playing. So, again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.